Fabulous. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday morning. We will kick off in probably 1 or 2 minutes, just wait for a few more people to arrive. Going to give ourselves till 2 past exactly, and then I'll get going.
A very specific time, 2 minutes past.
Very specific. Right, it is 2 past. Okay, so hello everybody. Happy Tuesday morning. Welcome to today's event. We're really excited to be delving into the topic of candidate expectations of Generation Z. Just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Talia, the MD of Connected Talent Technology, and very aptly, we are a candidate experience platform. Our customers range from British Airways, Lloyds Banking Group, also on the call today, to GSK, and all of them with a focus on improving the candidate's experience and therefore the conversion through the recruitment process, and particularly that of underrepresented talent. We have a great panelist joining us today. So Derek is from TapIn, who are a social media agency specialising in attracting diverse talent. We have Gronya from Lloyds Banking Group, who is the school's youth and societal growth manager, who spends most of her days with Generation Z. And last but not least, we have Yasmin, who is also from Connected Talent Technology, who's our head of customer experience and very much spends her days researching in this space. We'll be starting off the event with a bit of a research share from both TapIn and from us at Connected Talent Technology. And TapIn will be sharing data from a research piece that they've done into kind of the importance for the different groups that make up Generation Z and what they value the most. Then we'll be handing to Yasmin, who'll be sharing a bit of research we've been doing into the specific ways to bring these values to life, what sort of content really resonates with this generation, and then also going into a bit of a deeper analysis that we've done of over 1,000 qualitative responses to the question, what would make you feel included at work, which has been such an interesting piece of research for us. Then we'll be going into Q&A, and we'll be hearing a lot from Gronya on how Lloyds Banking Group approaches their kind of engagement with 14 to 19-year-olds, highlighting the differences in those key stages and age groups, also understanding the workplace readiness challenges that she's been experiencing in this space and how Lloyds is tackling it, including the crucial role that teachers and parents play. And we're hoping there'll be time for a bit of a Q&A from the audience at the end. So do put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll come to them at the end. And if we don't have time, we will tackle that offline and we'll send you those answers. But without further ado, I will hand to you, Derek.
It's almost like I should have expected that, but for whatever reason, it was still a shock. But yeah, I'll go a little bit into it. So for context, I think Talia done a very good job of introducing me. So I'm Derek. I'm commercial manager at TapIn. And yeah, I won't go too much more into it. I think she's nicely said who we are and what we do. So I'll keep it nice and short. So essentially what I'm going to be sharing is some of the research insights we found that mainly pertain to Black Gen Z, but also what that looks like at the intersections between other demographics also, as well as the male-female split as well. So in terms of the research itself, we run a research report called This is Black Gen Z. We've done it over the last 2 years now. First year, we had over 2,000 respondents. And this year, or last year, was over 3,000. So this is a little snapshot of what it looked like. For context, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just London-centric. So we've got people from all over the UK mainly. If you look here, I think we even had one person in Northern Ireland. So I'd like to think that's a statistical relevant piece of information. So yeah, I think what we wanted to do, make it outside of London, make sure we get the full breadth of experience from anyone who is either in the workplace, looking to enter the workplace, whether they're in university, school leaver age, or what that looks like as well. So the actual breakdown was about 28.7% were looking for a full-time role, 21% were looking for a part-time role. So that was your uni students, your school leavers, your college students. Then we also had those who were already in the workplace as well, and they were happy in their current role. Then we had those who just weren't looking for work for whatever reason that may be. And the reason we wanted to have that massive split between those was actually it's one thing understanding what people look for when they're going into work, but actually when people are in the workplace, what do those experiences look like and what are they expecting from employers? So one thing that we did find is that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging comes up as number one for Black candidates in terms of values that actually drive them to apply for roles. And what was interesting about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is that it wasn't just your blanket statements of we have a quota or we have a statement, a diversity statement. It was what does that look like when you're actually now on the ground within organizations? How does said company or employer embody those statements and values that they share? And we find that actually a lot of people are doing really well when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion in terms of what they put in place. So they might have ERGs, they might have support networks, they might have staff networks, etc. But actually, how much funding do those ERGs have? What does it look like for someone who then needs support through those ERGs? Is there enough allyship and or reverse mentorship or mentorship coming out of those situations as well? And then looking at those values again, it's when you then start looking at intersections, when you then look at neurodivergent Gen Z, mental health and well-being were the most pressing value that they looked at when it came to looking for an employer of choice. And that wasn't, again, just there is something in the job description that says we offer mental health support or there is X amount of things we do for well-being. It's again, what does that then look like on the ground? I think one of the main things that we found from this research is Gen Z is probably one of the most outgoing generations that has been in the workplace so far, in terms of it's not enough going on your website and or your careers pages to see what you're saying about yourself. People actually go out and message people on LinkedIn that work there already to ask them what it's like actively on the ground. So again, it's about making sure that there's a holistic view and that what you're saying from a recruitment lens is then embodied within the organization as well. And then looking at females, non-binary and trans Gen Z, again, diversity, equity, inclusion was the highest value, again, built in with that mental health. And what was interesting is when you look at the disparity between females, non-binary and trans Gen Z compared to males, males did not highlight, especially mental health, as anything that comes up when it comes to looking for an employer, whether that's generational or societal. That's something that we found was very interesting. So you'll find that those who were male would more be looking at things like salary or things like progression opportunities over mental health and well-being. Whereas when we looked at the female audience, it was almost the opposite. I think salary does rank highly across all demographics, and it's one of those things that we say to our clients, where you can try to be as transparent with your salaries as possible. I know for some people, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, so it's not always the easiest thing to do. But being upfront and almost having those salary bandings even if it's your early careers job roles, will help people make more informed decisions. And where we are now living in a time of economic crisis, people will call it, or cost of living crisis, what happens is that those allow people to make decisions that not only benefit them, but those around them as well. I think we find that people that come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or come from disadvantaged or marginally represented groups will always cite that they're not only looking for a career for themselves, but they need to be able to support their family and those around them as well. So what we done, the research was a mix of qualitative and quantitative data as well. So what we've got on screen now is just one of those qualitative points where actually it was a Black Kenyan woman speaking about how actually when she was younger, she didn't really feel as if there was enough emphasis put on it. However, well-being aspects that organizations have is one of the main things that she looks at. And again, it's making sure that the people that you work with have that almost same level of, I'll say, the values that you do, which is why people actually actively go out and ask, what do you think? What do you think about this? What is it like to work there? So that's something that we found works really well. And I think almost coming back to the original title of the webinar being what do candidates expect? I think candidate expectations have been shifting over the last 5 years. I think what people would have seen before as nice to haves are now bare minimums. And it's interesting to see that things like, I think that this is the one here, Black candidates actually said that not getting communication or feedback, whether that be positive or negative, is actually deterrent when applying for a role. So you might find people going through the application process. They might actually get the offer at the end and then renege on it or decline it at that point. And it's actually things like when you're not getting adequate communication and feedback throughout the process, that's almost indicative of what the culture is going to be like when people go in. And I think, obviously, depending on what the hiring numbers look like, it's always difficult for organizations to go down the route of we're going to give detailed feedback to everyone. But as and where possible, maybe towards the later stages, even if somebody does get the role, it's worth saying the reason you did get the role was XYZ, or these were the things that we were looking for, these are the things that you marked against. Just so again, it's about how do those candidates then share that information with, maybe it's their younger sisters or younger brothers or their wider community. I think we find that from a Black Gen Z perspective, the community information sharing is one of the main things that people look for, again, when they go into certain industries that traditionally they may have been underrepresented. So then looking at, now you've got the candidates as employees have now come into the role. What do people look for when they're now within the organization? I think the main thing, which we always get the question of what does it mean, but authenticity seems to be the key to job satisfaction. And I think there's been this massive push across all industries around bringing your authentic self to work. I think I'm almost I'm split on it, because I think as any person, you're probably going to have two versions of yourself. There's your outside self and your work self. What we say about authenticity is, do you have the platforms and almost the systems in place to allow people to express whatever version of themselves that they want to, as opposed to feeling like they have to almost perform in a certain way. The second one, again, which I spoke about earlier, was about having actually engaged and well-funded staff networks and employee resource groups that are actively engaged with. I think we find that some of the clients that we have, or some people that we speak to, they'll say there's an ERG or there's a staff network for specific niches or whatever it may be. But then when you actually speak to people that belong to those staff networks, they'll say, one, it's either not engaged, two, it's not well funded, or three, there's no structure around it. So actually, how do you make sure that those things are structured? And think, coming back to things like mentorship, it's all good and well having a mentorship program in place, but what does that look like for someone who's entry level? Is that set out? Is that structured in a way where people actually feel like they're going to gain something from it? I think the last point here on the left is just around training. And this isn't training for people coming in, but more business-wide training. I think we found there's a lot of anti-racism training or whatever it may be that organizations are investing in. But actually, it's around, one, not just having that at the leadership level, but making sure D&I is a company-wide thing. And if it is company-wide, make sure that training is available at all levels. But actually training on things like racism and colorism in the workplace, making sure there's appropriate channels to then channel those challenges or concerns as and when they pop up. As well as, actually, we find that when we speak to people that hold mentorship roles or people that are mentors, they don't feel like they've had adequate training for that role that they now hold. So it's, how do you make sure that there's support on both sides? And the last point on the right hand side there, just around retention, is that actually this isn't just around Black Gen Z. When you look at trans Gen Z, Black Gen Z, people that are diversely able, and LGBTQ plus, there is still this feeling that there isn't enough space to be their authentic selves within the workplace. So yeah, I think coming down to then the point that touches directly onto that is, we find that, again, from the research, when people are going for job interviews, only 45% of Black females feel comfortable being their authentic selves. This could range from anything to how people speak within interviews, which has always been a misnomer, or all the way down to how they present themselves, whether it be their choice of hair, whether it be what they decide to wear, how they actually maybe present whatever task they have to do. And the direct comparison of this is actually 86% of white females feel the same. And again, to the point where 86% seems a lot higher than 45, which it is, but actually there's still a 14% percentile of white females that still don't feel that they can be their authentic selves. So I still think there's a lot of work to be done, not only from an early careers perspective, just from a broader recruitment perspective, as to how do you actually share that message coming across. And I think the last point I wanted to make on this was just around actually hiring teams. So I think this piece here is just around, actually, if the hiring teams and the HR teams aren't diverse, people see that as almost a deterrent to joining the company. Because if your HR teams, who are supposed to almost be the middle ground, then don't you feel like they don't represent you or understand where you come from, people are a little bit more iffy about what it's going to be like working there if they then do need support going forward. But I will stop there and I will hand back over.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of that research. And by the way, at the end of this, we'll have a QR code to actually download this specific report. So that will be at the end of the event. Fab. I will pass over to you now, Yasmin.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Derek. And actually, when we were putting this together and we were looking at our research and the TapIn research, and we were really kind of pleased, but also sort of suppose slightly kind of concerned to see the exact same themes in our research. So you will see some of the similar things coming up here. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is actually a really recent survey that we ran with one of our customers, British Airways. So they use our technology for kind of talent pooling and candidate experience. They've had the platform for about 5 years. It's reached over 30,000 young people in the UK. And we reached out and we surveyed kind of 700 young people, and they were split into 2 groups. So on the left is the group who didn't interact with British Airways via their candidate experience platform. So they interacted them kind of through the sort of general job application flow. And on the right is the group who did. And what we mean by interacting with BA here is they had a chance to speak to digital mentors who were kind of early careers colleagues that are already in the business with BA. They were interacting with kind of bite-sized learning content that had been created and curated by British Airways to kind of explain who they really are and what it's like to work for them. And we asked both these groups to answer the question, how would you describe the British Airways brand in 3 words? So on the left, you can see words like classy, sophisticated, prestigious. It was this very kind of legacy heritage view of the British Airways brand. Not necessarily negative things, but not actually the image that British Airways wants to portray, especially for hiring purposes as an employer. These are kind of slightly kind of exclusive language that maybe makes some people feel like they won't align with British Airways as a brand. For the group who did interact with British Airways on this kind of personalised candidate experience journey, their words were really different. So innovative, inclusive, sustainable, diverse. You know, we've got caring, we've even got global as opposed to British in there. Like the view of British Airways is much broader. It was much more welcoming, much more inclusive. And this is, you know, this is a very intentional shift that British Airways have managed to achieve through this kind of employer brand piece, delivering their content and having their mentors be that authentic voice for them. Like Derek was saying earlier, they're not just putting something on their career page that says we're an inclusive company. They've got mentors representing genuine diversity in the business, giving their authentic experiences of working at BA. And all of this is contributed to this mindset shift, essentially. And I wanted to dig a little bit more into what content can do this sort of thing and what content is going to resonate with Gen Z during this journey into your business. So we had a look at the most kind of popular and most completed content across all of our early careers facing platforms hosted by our customers. So this is very kind of cross sector. And the themes were very consistent, like platform to platform. Although the individual titles were slightly different, the type of contents that were getting the most engagement were very, very similar. And you can see here there's a lot that aligns with what Derek's just said as well. So there are things around sort of key workplace readiness skills, self-awareness, resilience, kind of receiving feedback. Those are really popular. It's like allowing these young people to feel like they're prepared and they're ready to enter the world of work, giving them a little bit of a leg up before they join. Things like really basic stuff like office etiquette, communicating professionally, stuff that we would assume that everybody knows, I think, coming into the business. But actually, if you're transitioning from education, it's a really different world. And they really appreciate, like the rating of this 4.8 out of 5 stars. Young people really, really appreciate you saying to them, look, we know this is going to be really different from you. We understand that. Here's some tools and some frameworks to support you before you get into the office and have to start, you know, behaving a bit differently. Other things that were really, really popular, anything to do with kind of net zero, sustainability, biodiversity, talking about not just, you know, your targets or, you know, kind of your measures for this, but actually like real kind of tangible things that happen in your office spaces, in your practices. Maybe you've got rules around ethics, that kind of thing, are really quite highly valued and tend to be quite good selling points. You know, if you're trying to sort of buy people into working for your company, be really evidencing this is really popular. And unsurprisingly, well-being, self-confidence, mental health support, again, as Derek already mentioned, really, really top value for these young people. And for this content, when I was looking through it, there was a lot more. There's the obvious, here are our policies, here are our procedures, we have these things in place. But there's also, through the mentors and their bios, people sharing their genuine stories of using those policies. I've worked here for 2 years and I was able to get these adjustments and I found the team to be really welcoming, you know, genuinely kind of sharing the truth behind those policies. Are they actually inactive? How easy are they to actually request for these things and to use them? And again, you can see like 100% completion rate on that sort of content. Everybody wants to get this information. And the last one is see culture and social and inclusivity. So again, speaking to that point about demonstrating like what does it actually look like in a typical working day to work somewhere that is inclusive, that has employee resource groups. What do those groups get up to? Like, I don't just want a list of them. I want to see, why would I join them? What do I get from joining these groups and communities? What kind of DEI training is there? Who gets access to it? It's bringing all of that stuff forward into the application journey early on is going to get so much more buy-in, and you're going to stand out so much more for this group than those who just have your classic early careers webpage. The other piece of research that we did, this was actually kind of a built-in question that was built into the platform for one of our customers. And the question was, what would make you feel included at work? It was a free text question. So there was 1,000 responses. We went through every single one, picking out what the key themes were and kind of putting them together. And we found that kind of 60% of all the responses fell into these first two categories. So awareness and visibility, respect and acceptance. The top responses were, unsurprisingly, knowing that they will be a part of a diverse team, like seeing that, like, to a department specific level. People are saying, if I'm joining engineering, I want to see that you've got engineers who are female, who are Black. It's really, really evidencing that in every space, and not just kind of as a number, a stat that says, we're 40-60 split or whatever. Similarly, seeing underrepresented groups in leadership roles, so like demonstrating that there's a path for everybody there, and that progression is possible regardless of your background and your lived experiences. On top of this, in respect and acceptance, loads and loads of young people saying that what they wanted most was to feel heard. And this is quite a hard thing, I think, to demonstrate in just a piece of static content. And I think this comes back to the idea of having ambassadors and advocates who can speak to this truthfully to these young people. Like Derek was saying, if somebody reaches out and messages one of your colleagues on LinkedIn, are they going to be able to speak to these sorts of things? Are they going to be able to say, actually, yeah, no, I do really feel heard. I've never had a call where I felt like I've been spoken over or my opinions have been disregarded because of my background. That's what they're really looking for. About 20% of these responses focused on support frameworks and policy. The majority were talking about mentoring, interestingly. And again, this all comes back to that authenticity point, speaking to real people and knowing that when they come into the business, that they can also receive some sort of mentoring, some kind of one-to-one support or guidance. That I think a lot of them were kind of linking this up to the idea of like having someone who can support me to make a request for adjustments, who can tell me where the prayer room is in the building. It's that kind of thing that they're looking for. It's just a little bit of a somebody to link them up and connect them to all the things that they might need in the business. Of course, lots of people were asking that they would like to see adjustments. And I think one of the things with adjustments, and also sort of spaces like sensory rooms, quiet workspaces, prayer spaces, is they want to see evidence. They want to see pictures of that space. Is it a proper space that's been set up, or is it just a former meeting room that's, the sign on the door's been changed? How far have you actually gone with this? Have you really thought this through? Does it have the right things in it? So they're looking for evidence of that. There was also lots of comments about having a feedback system. And these are all people who are pre-offer, they're either thinking about or in the application process, and they're thinking to this level of detail about what their world is going to look like when they come into the business. Can I submit feedback anonymously or confidentially? Is there a safe space for me to talk about my concerns? The last 20% were focused on the sort of team bonding and connections with their colleagues. So events, socials, celebrations, networking opportunities like across the business. So there was this real desire to not be kind of siloed into the team that you joined, but to have connections to other departments and other kind of specialisms within the business. Something that I thought really interesting in this that came up in a lot of the comments was lots and lots of young people were talking about networks, recognizing that they're seeing networks sort of for specific ethnicities or disability, LGBTQ. But the one thing that they were asking for that I don't think I've ever seen is having a network for early careers as a group. So like people starting out in their job for the first time and being able to share that experience with all the other people in the similar sort of age group who are also entering the world of work for the first time. And I'd love to know if anybody in here does have that sort of network that is just, beyond just like a cohort, is like an entire network for all of your early careers, career starters coming through, where they can talk about some of those really common challenges about being a new person in the world of work. So just an interesting point there. If you are doing that, I'd love to know if you are. We have it. Essex County Council, brilliant. That's amazing. And quite a few of these comments were about respect and fairness, and these were quite broad, and they were around, people being kind, people being, accepting me for who I am, being valued for my contribution, so the work that I do, and not necessarily who I am. And lots of people saying, I don't want special treatment either way. I just want to be seen for, doing good work. So some really, really great, interesting stuff in there. Lots of practical things, lots of really big level things. But I think most companies do have a lot of stuff across all of these categories, but they're just not talking about them in the right way. And I think if there was something to take away from this, is if you're looking at this and going, yeah, we do this, how well are you actually talking about it? Like, are you giving examples? Are you giving genuine stories? Are you giving photos, videos, or are you just putting them in a list on a page? And that's the difference here, is it's that evidencing and that social proof that really then gets this across. I think I'll stop there. Ready for panel.
Amazing. Thank you. Right, we're going to go straight into you, Grania. So obviously you use the platform. I know you also use social media. Can you just talk a little bit about how you communicate the kind of offer that Lloyds Banking Group has for early careers? And then I'll go into a question about challenges that you find in that space. But I think kind of overall giving that description would be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost a copy and paste of everything Derek has spoke about and Yasmin has shared in your Gen Z expectations of the workplace. So what we're seeing on our connector platform and how we have found that to be really successful with Gen Z candidates is having the direct evidence, so videos of a day in the life of the colleague, videos of our networks that operate within Lloyds Banking Group, but also links out to TikTok accounts and, our influencers that work for Lloyds who have their own influencer population externally, because they're giving transparent and real accounts of what it's like to work for Lloyds, what it's like to work for other organisations they've been with, and apprenticeship panels that they've gone through. So we're very much focused on letting them see the real life at Lloyds Banking Group. We absolutely have an EVP, an employee value proposition, which is our aspiration, where we would like to be as an organisation within the next 3 years and what we're working towards. And we will share our aspirational goals around percentages of female and senior leadership roles and percentages of minority ethnicity. But we also share where we are and how we've progressed to date on that. So we're not where we would like to be, because we will always achieve to do more and be better. But we're able to show what is the culture really like at Lloyds Banking Group, not just what we would like to be known as. And I think that is the real, part that Gen Z young people entering the world of work want to see. What is the reality of the place that I'm going to work for, not just what they would like their brand to be seen as. So I think making sure that you have content that tells that story, that helps bring that to life, and is your evidence checkpoints for all of the things that you claim to be. Having those little videos on Connector, they are the ones that we get the most views on. That's the ones we get the most engagement and comments on. And I think for anybody, whether you're Gen Z or a millennial like the old lady that I am, that is what you want to see. You want to see what is the reality of this place that I'm going to work for, not just what the advertisement tells me they are. So yeah, I think it's having those proof points is really important. And
then from a social media perspective, how what social media does Lloyds Banking Group allow you to use? What challenges have you faced? I know you faced some, so do share.
So this is quite an interesting one. So Lloyds Banking Group, historically, we had that legacy of, people view the brand as being very professional. They imagine everybody that works for Lloyds is a grey-haired white man in a suit, and it's absolutely not like that at all. And for a social media perspective, our presence was very heavily restricted. So way back 10 years ago when I joined the organisation, you couldn't even say on Facebook that you worked for Lloyds Banking Group. You couldn't mention where you worked. You couldn't take photographs of you out with friends and tag them in case they had said they worked in Lloyds Banking Group. But it was very much based around that fear culture of not only did you work for a bank and you could potentially be a target for fraud, but because they were so worried about what people might say and put the brand in disrepute online, or have someone say, oh, this colleague from Lloyds Banking Group behaved in this way or demonstrated this, so that means Lloyds support that. So I understand why it was very heavily restricted. We've gone on a huge shift. So now our senior leadership team, from Charlie, the CEO, right down, actively encourage people to go on social media, whether that's your personal accounts, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, but also the likes of Glassdoor, and write reviews about your experience as a current employee. When people leave the organisation, there's an offboarding process, your standard exit interviews, but we would also say to people, go on to Glassdoor and leave a review about your time here and your genuine review of it. So that is absolutely encouraged, so that people see that real life aspect of not just what Lloyds are putting out as a brand and a place to work, but what are the actual employees, past, present, current, future, saying about the organisation. I'm really active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is kind of the professional network, as everyone knows. That's where we'll share all of the propositions that we do in Lloyds, all of the stuff that we do in the community. But also on my personal pages, I have them linked to my LinkedIn. And I want people to see not just who I am in a corporate environment, but who I am as a person, because I'm really passionate about young people being able to see people like themselves working for the top 5 big corporate organisations. I grew up on a council estate. My mum and dad lived on benefits, but actually I am just your normal everyday person that grew up in a lower socioeconomic background, now works for one of the top 5 big corporations. And I want other young people to see that, you can be a financial services corporate girl or boy and also still go to a rave on a Saturday night. I love my festivals, I love my music, and I am just my authentic self on both platforms, but just being cautious about how I present myself and what I put forward. And as long as you're not doing anything that doesn't align with group values, then you should be really comfortable in going on social media and sharing both yourself from an employer perspective, but also from your real life personal. So we're definitely shifted the dial on our social media presence. I think we could do much more in social media. We're only kicking off our TikTok accounts, and we're getting used to how do we communicate with Gen Z on TikTok. But definitely it's a huge opportunity for young people to see the real life of an organisation and the real people that work there.
It's so interesting because with a lot of our platform clients, there is generally a fear of individuals posting because they're worried, what is allowed, will I get told off? And we encourage, so when a mentor signs up to the platform, they also get like a digital badge that we encourage them to put onto LinkedIn. And I think the more that the employer can do that's actively asking individuals, can you share this? There's this kind of green flag that actually we really do want you talking about us externally. There are some companies that have social media policies as well around like, these are the things that we'd love for you to be sharing. These are the things that maybe less so. But I think it is the generation coming in now, it's almost like impossible for you to ignore that they're wanting this authentic view of an employer. And the best way to get that out is through your employees. So that there is a question from the audience about how you encourage that. So definitely having like a policy in place, actively sending things that you want people to post so that they're given that green flag from kind of corporate HR. Is there any other ways, Gordon, that you found that it's kind of great, like an easy way to encourage people to get active?
So we have, like most companies on LinkedIn, you'll have your employer page, the Lloyds Banking Group page, and as an employee, you can join My Company. So you can then reshare and repost the official media posts from the organisation. So our group corporate affairs team are amazing at creating that genuine, authentic content that people want to share and repost and comment on. That's a great way to do it. So have a media stack of stuff that you want your colleagues just to reproduce and reshare. So then there's a consistent message, but then also being really clear with colleagues around what the group values are. And if as long as your social media posts align with the group values, then there shouldn't be any problems. If at any point you're thinking that you're going to post something on social media that has connections to your organisation and it doesn't align with the values, that's where I would maybe rethink and ask myself, is this the right post to make? Would this be portraying either me or the organisation in a light that we wouldn't want to be seen in? But then also then there is that shift around, well, is it authentic if you're filtering things and you're censoring? So it's being really cautious and mindful of who you are as an authentic person and what you want to be known for, but also the impacts that has on your organisation then too, both positive and negative.
And Derek, obviously this is very much your world. I'm guessing you support employers tackling those kind of social media challenges. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, don't mind. I think one of the main issues that you'll find with social media is, one, there's just some companies that can't use certain platforms. So I think Lloyds are in a very beneficial position. But I think some, for example, TikTok's a very contentious one, where people either is so much red tape that you can't jump on it, or by the time you're on it's a bit late. I think one of the main issues for brands at the minute is that this generation mainly is shifting from a brand trust perspective where posting on a brand account is enough to more that personal people element where people actually want to hear from other people. So I think, for example, you could post the same post on your careers TikTok, for example. However, it will get a lot more traction on an individual's platform, for example, because again, it's just making sure that sounds authentic. I think another issue that you find is where there's a lot of red tape and it sometimes takes a long time to get things cleared and passed through the correct channels. By the time the content comes out, sometimes it could be dated. So for example, if you're trying to do reactive content that maybe is jumping onto a trend, you could do that 2-3 weeks down the line, and social media acts so quickly that by the time that's then approved and you want to get it out, it's now no longer within the times. It's about trying to make sure that, again, if you are going to go down the social media route, firstly, understanding what your aims are with that social media content. Because I think if you're very almost clear about, all right, is this brand awareness? Do we want to get our name out there, or are we trying to drive direct applications from this? That will then inform the kind of content you're putting out there. And then when you do that, it's right, do we have scope to be doing reactive content, or is there going to have to be a 6-month plan that has to be signed off and agreed? And then making sure that you then stick to those parameters. Because I think some of the brands that you then find are, in our opinion, aren't doing as well on social media. You can see that there's a lack of structure in how the social media content's going out there. So maybe 2 posts will be very professional, in your face. This could live on a careers page, and then the next post could be a day in the life. Let's walk around the office. Let's talk about drinks after work or whatever. And it's just making sure that messaging is very clear throughout. And again, there is scope for both. So if it is that the angle you want to go down is more professional, sticking with that will also work for a specific audience. And then the other way will also work for a specific audience, but it's just making sure that you're very clear as a brand and organization as to what you want your social media messaging and almost your tone of voice to be. And once that's clear, the content should almost look after itself, I'd say.
Amazing. And there's a question from the audience. From an employer perspective, what has been their interpretation of employees bringing their authentic self? What does that mean in real terms? Maybe companies and HR professionals I've spoken to, it's more of a marketing spin. Yes, I feel like you could probably talk to this one around what is bringing your authentic self, but also what are the ways to actually demonstrate that an employer allows an individual to bring their authentic self.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm sure that there are companies that do use it just as a bit of a marketing spin and don't really put it in practice. But some of the things I've seen are really things that you probably have in place anyway, but just haven't thought about it perhaps in this way. So flexible working adjustments, things like having relaxed or inclusive dress codes, allowing people to show up to work in what is comfortable, what reflects them, their culture, their personality. Things that typically might limit sort of self-expression and sort of individualism. There are some customers that we've worked with who they demonstrate this through the candidate experience by kind of giving examples of people who look different, who work in different ways, have different work setups, but they're in the same team. They've had a chance to create a space that they can work in that suits them and reflects who they are. It can be stuff, like, for example, somebody might prefer to receive written instructions over verbal ones, and knowing that they could kind of ask that and it would be respected and kind of observed by the rest of the team. A really good example, I think it was a couple of years ago, they did this, our Slack, who are like a communications platform very similar to Teams. They introduced a little like Google document that people would attach to their profiles in Slack, so in their internal communications platform. And it was kind of like a how to work with me document. And in there, people could put things like, I pick up my kids at 3, and so I'm not usually around at this time. I prefer to be sent an agenda before a call so I can prepare. I like to see the transcript. I like to have 2 screens when I'm working in the office. Like all these little pieces of the puzzle of that person put together, and they had these documents so that when you were engaging with colleagues, you could open it up and have a quick scan through. What's the best way to communicate with this person? What's the best way for me to kind of work on this project with them? What do they need from me? And vice versa. And it was allowing everyone in that space then to just be themselves and be able to work in the way that worked best for them. And I think ultimately that's good for productivity. It's good for morale and for team working. But yeah, you've really got to look at what you're doing in practical terms in order to demonstrate bringing your authentic self to work. It's quite a tricky one. Yeah,
I think it is communicating policy, but like demonstrating that in real life experiences, so an individual talking to how their specific life is supported. I'm going to move us on now to a question for Gonya. So you specialize in kind of age 14 to 19. Obviously that is a wide spectrum. How does Lloyds Banking Group engage differently with a 14-year-old versus a 19-year-old, for example?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of tailored approach happens. We have a huge program offering that we go out to schools, bring young people into the organisation for employer encounters and work experience. But it's really about tailoring to their, not just their age, but their level of understanding and their experience. So you might have a 14-year-old who has been a carer for their sick family member their whole life, who's extremely mature, has had really, challenging life experience that even some adults wouldn't have. So in terms of maturity level, they are as capable as a 19-year-old. But equally, you might have a 19-year-old who has been mummied from day one by mummy and has everything done for them, and really is struggling to transition to the world of work because being let go of the nest is a real challenge. They've never been allowed to go anywhere alone. They're picked up and dropped off by mum every day, and and have a really different life experience than some young 14-year-olds. It's really about tailoring it to the individual. And that's why a lot of the work that we do is face-to-face, in person, where we build a relationship with that young people to understand how can we best support you and actually what are the challenges that you're seeing. We also do a lot of work with social mobility organisations to target young people from diverse backgrounds and disadvantaged backgrounds, because we're conscious that as Lloyds Banking Group, we have that image of being a professional organisation that maybe only certain people go to work in, and that's not the case at all. So we want to remove those barriers and make sure that young people from all over the UK have access to our experiences. So I think one of the big challenges that we're seeing is workplace readiness. And when we are engaging with young people, whether they're 14 or 19, our goal is always to build their skill and their capability, that when they start to transition, be that at 16 or 19 after university, or even later, depending on their course that they choose, that they're then ready to transition into the world of work. And we've seen some really interesting, funny stories of young people joining the organisation through an apprenticeship programme or coming on work experience, and their expectations of what the world of work looking like being very different than what an employer is expecting from a young person.
Very interesting. So I'm going to ask you, how do you find that companies are trying to tackle that workplace readiness question? Like, how are they assessing that ahead of day one? How are they making sure that they're prepped ahead of day one, whether that's a work experience or an apprenticeship program or grad scheme?
Yeah. So obviously a lot of the employers we work with, they have this dedicated space to have those conversations. So if you're lucky enough to have something like a connector platform where you can give much more richer interactive content on these specific topics, a lot of it is very skills based. So we would call it, I suppose, pre-skilling for these sorts of these kind of challenges that people are facing. So translating and kind of looking at, this is how you would do this maybe at school, this is how it's a bit different at work, and sort of linking those two things together in a really sort of very, very practical, bite-sized way. Like these young people, especially at the times that they're applying, they might be doing exams, they're busy, and so you've got to keep it very short, very punchy, and very kind of example driven. So creating almost sort of like e-learning content is a really good way of doing that. The other way to do it is also to get them to essentially start networking with people who are in their professional kind of position in their career, to kind of learn those skills through interactions with people who are just maybe a couple of years ahead of them. So for our customers on the platform, this is through kind of light touch mentoring. So how that would look is somebody coming through, maybe they're a work experience student or they're an early careers application. They get the opportunity to chat in a very kind of safe and sort of relatively casual way. You know, through the platform, it's just like messaging in Teams, but they get to hear how that person responds to them, the way that they speak, the way that they talk about the world of work, what their day looks like, how they work with other people, how they communicate, and they get exposed to the reality essentially before they are in, which obviously you want to sort of nip this thing in the bud as early as possible, because otherwise it's a bit of a resource drain later on when you're having to kind of run through and have these conversations with people about how their day should look when they go home, how they take their lunch, how they should speak to their colleagues. You know, it's getting them exposed as soon as possible and allowing them to start practicing those network skills, those communication skills with real people in your business. It's a perfect way to sort of prime them, so when they come through that door on day one, they've already got it down really. Yeah.
And we're finding that more and more of our customers, so traditionally the candidate experience tool is for the candidate, but we're finding more of our customers are creating a kind of a space for teachers and parents, because they're recognizing that they do have a huge influence on the success of how much, you know, a young person joins on day one and is ready, but also how on board they are with the fact that they're doing an apprenticeship. Grania, I know you do a lot in this space. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of tackle that teacher and parent space?
Yeah, so we've started doing a number of initiatives, both with teachers and parents. The first one is our Skills Fest, which is an open door Saturday event. So we pop up all around the country at our locations. And it's really a day to invite the outside in. So young people, parents, mums, dads, you know, aunties, uncles, careers advisors, teachers, they all come along. And it's more of an insight into Lloyds Banking Group, an insight into the world of work. We do a little bit of work on skills building, but it's really about helping those parents that will come with their children who are absolutely really supportive and wanting their young people to be successful. And that's why they've dragged them out of bed on the Saturday morning to go. But it's really about separating them from the young person to say, if this was a real day at work, you wouldn't be coming hand in hand with your 19-year-old to drop them off and, you know, pat them on the back of the head and sit with them all day while some adult comes and speaks to them. And often it's that separation of taking the young person away from that parent to child experience and having the adult to adult experience with them. So when they're on our programs and our initiatives, we very much say to them on day one, we are not your teachers, we are not your parents. You are here as a colleague today. You are my colleague and I will treat you that way. And here is the expectations in the workplace around mutual respect, understanding, you know, listening and learning from each other. But also then about giving them that responsibility and ownership to be self-efficacy, that, you know, if you are coming into the world of work, you cannot rely on mummy or daddy to be there 24/7 between the 9 to 5 to tell you what to do and how to speak and how to behave. And often what we see is when we're asking the young person a question, mum and dad tries to answer for them. And you're having to say to mum and dad, let's take you off here for a cup of tea so we can actually work with the young person. So it's really about reminding that young person that they are at a stage in their life where they are becoming an adult, and that their day and how their life has been running up until that point is going to shift dramatically, whether that's going off to university or coming into the world of work. So, it's really interesting what we see in that space and how children quickly change when they see that they're being treated like an adult. And then the teacher zone is really interesting as well. So we've started to do work experience for teachers. And what we learned through our experiences with the students and young people coming on board was that actually the guidance they were being given by careers advisors and teachers, whilst well intended, wasn't always right or accurate. And speaking to the teachers, what we had learned was a lot of these teachers go off and they go to university, they do their PGCE to become a teacher, they go into that profession, and they are a teacher for the rest of their lives. So they're then trying to give careers advice to young people about jobs that didn't even exist when they went into the world of work, and actually jobs that are going to come up in 5 years' time that even we don't know what they're going to look like. So it's really difficult for a careers advisor or a teacher to give that genuine guidance when they have had no experience themselves. So given the teacher work experience, it's an opportunity for them to come into the organisation, see the different roles, the different ways of working, how a corporate office functions, the different tech that we have access to, and even the expectations, because teachers are very much ingrained in how the school culture is and the behaviours in a school and that parent to child relationship. And it's helping the teacher see that actually your job as an educator isn't just to help them pass exams, it's to help them also prepare for the world of work. And the parent's job is also then to kind of sandwich the child to make sure that they're getting that support from both angles. But there's absolutely more opportunity for employers to get involved in that and take that ownership of how do we help those young people transition and how do we take that load off parents and teachers too.
It is so interesting. I think that there is a stat that I can't remember, but it is something around if parents are on board with your apprenticeship, you're basically way more likely to successfully complete your apprenticeship and you hit the ground running. Whereas if they're not really for it and there's still some snobbery around it, the dropout rates just increase so dramatically. So that, there's a huge amount of work that we / employers can be doing in that space. Derek, are you finding that there is a shift of people thinking about doing like social media campaigns specifically targeting teachers and parents, who I imagine are more on Instagram and Facebook, but that might be wrong?
Not so much teachers, no, but I think, there's a lot of push to more targeting parents. And I think, again, it's around the messaging of that being correct. So I think, again, we know that for most people, the career that you then end up choosing to go to is one that is then supported either by your parents, your guardians, or your close family as well. So I think, especially in the apprenticeship and really early career space, and maybe even school leavers age, that's where you're finding a lot more people doing more campaigns targeting parents. And again, that's more your Instagram, Facebooks, as opposed to your TikToks and Snapchat. I think you're finding that that's a space that, whether it's an age thing or I don't know, it's a generational thing, that's a space where people are doing really well, because I think they kind of understand what, as a parent, you'd be looking to almost hear if you're going to send your child to an apprenticeship or school. So that kind of content is resonating really well. What we're then finding is that sometimes the messaging that's on that content isn't then exactly what maybe the student or the young person then wants to hear. So the way you speak to those audiences is very different. So we'd almost say that instead of having that one approach as targeting parents, it's then splitting that into a campaign that has two almost angles to it. So on one hand, it is more your teachers, your parents. On the other hand, you're still speaking to that almost candidate expectation as well. So you're hitting both at the same time, I would say.
Interesting. So I am going to go to the final question now. Any changes coming in the future? Yes, I'm going to go to you first.
No, I've been thinking about this a lot, and kind of the next generation, Gen Alpha, and kind of how things shifting. And I think one of the things that I see a lot is like this hustle culture and this sort of growing gig economy, and this real sort of growing trend amongst young people. I think through exposure, there's a lot of there's so much info on social podcasts and things like that talking about being your own boss, being an entrepreneur, being an influencer. And I think this is actually completely shifting like the realm of possibility in making money for young people. I think they may be a little bit misled to some degree in thinking that these are really, really viable career paths for all of them. I think, you know, a lot of us probably know that, you know, you almost need to get lucky to some degree to have success in being, for example, a social media influencer. And there's this perception that that's flexible, you won't have to work as much, you know, you're at home, you know, you've got your camera set up in your room and you're making millions. But actually the reality of that is really, really different. I think, Grania, you had some good examples of that very conversation, but I think it is shifting an attitude in what the work day should be, and like, should we be shifting with them? I don't know, but you know, this idea that maybe the 9 to 5:30 is going in the bin, things like 4-day working week trials, I see more and more of those popping up with lots of success. And I think that this is going to start coming through as like, well, we've seen that people can do it this way and we want to work this way, and being, you know, requesting the ways of working that works for them, and just expecting that's how they're going to work.
Grania, you definitely had some good examples of this with Gen Z and their expectations in this space.
Yeah, so definitely more general expectations of Gen Z in the workplace is really focused on having flexible working arrangements and having agility in your day job to be able to decide what to work on and when. Which absolutely we're all for at Lloyds Banking Group. I think many organisations are behind that flexibility and see the benefits of it. What we're not seeing as an employer then is when Gen Z enter the workplace is the level of professionalism needed in the workplace to be able to meet deadlines and plan your time and time management, and then that plays out in performance reviews where Gen Z's expectations of what they should be delivering when and how are very different to what the organisation needs. And it could be that, you know, most managers are millennials managing Gen Zs and their expectations are different, and we need to find a happy medium. But I think definitely that influencer mindset of, I'm going to go viral and become a millionaire overnight. You know, we have a session that we do with young people called Mate 23, and it's about future aspirations. It's getting them to imagine what their life is like when they wake up on their 23rd birthday, and then bringing them back to reality with cost of living and how much that lifestyle is going to cost a month to fund. And one of the jobs that we look at in that session is a social media influencer. So it's really interesting that there's 1.04 billion TikTok accounts, and only 4% of those people make money from it. And they're people that are actively posting, not just watchers. That's people that are creating content and delivering content on a weekly or monthly basis. So if 4% of those 1.4 billion are only making enough to survive, to be able to earn 24 grand a year on TikTok, you have to have 50,000 followers. And I think the young people's expectations of the amount of work needed going into creating that content, it's much more than what a 9-to-5 corporate job would be. It's creating content, it's planning content, it's doing the editing, it's all of that done by themselves. So when we talk about them and the realities of what that social media role might look like, the flexibility that they want from a workplace doesn't exist in that role. They see the outputs, but it's kind of like that iceberg analogy. You see the success at the top, but you don't see what happens underneath. And it's very quickly a moment of realization that, like to your point, Tally, it's often through luck or sponsorship that those people become successful. So, chase your dreams, and we will support young people to encourage them to aspire to do great things, but have a backup and have something that is realistically achievable that is going to give you that lifestyle as well.
Amazing. Thank you. We are actually at time now. But honestly, thanks so much for everybody for joining. Just to flag that there are 2 QR codes, one to the kind of report that we've written alongside British Airways about our kind of 5-year partnership with them and shifting mindsets, and then the other one to the Black Gen Z report written by TapIn. And there are our contact details. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I'm sure we'll see you around soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for your time, guys.